had this unique opportunity where Ukraine welcomed me and took such good care of me while I was bedridden with COVID-19. Someone in Lviv came and brought me soup through my window, and I just wanted to do something in gratitude appropriate in the context of Lviv as well, kind of talking about a Western Ukraine and the feelings and the sentiments there. So this is largely a thank you, I guess, for the opportunity to get to visit such an amazing place and a unique, lesser known European city. I'm so grateful I got to go there as a 24-year-old, and I want to go back, and I hope that Ukrainians who see this work will be reminded of their home. This painting was done as a sketch or an initial study for a larger work in this exhibition. It depicts a monastery near the city square. Historically, it was an armory and was kind of a key component for Lviv's defense mechanism. So I just loved this story, and as well as that building, I included in this sketch the statue of King Danilo, and I kind of wanted to do that to kind of place it and make it unmistakable for its situation in the city. I didn't want to just make it an obscure European street scene, which would be lovely, but I wanted to kind of place it more in its historical setting of this modern day Lviv with its historical founder looking over the city in a way. This is the last one that I made for this exhibition. It goes along with the title of the show. City of Lions is a borrowed symbol from the coat of arms of Ukraine. I just really liked the sculptural effect and kind of the ghosting, softening of edges in the blue. There's currently a monument there on Gorodovskaya Street. During the pandemic, at the end of 2020, I spent most of my time just walking around the city with my camera, not making a lot of contact. This was during lockdown, so a lot of these establishments were closed, so I didn't get to go inside of them, so I had to content myself with the exterior beauty. This is a cafe, actually, that I would frequent sometimes and play chess with a friend. Just around this corner is an art supply store that my artist friends and I would get our materials from and draw 3 times a week in a life drawing session. So I just loved, I was there at this time of day. So many days during the winter were gray and quite flat in their light, and occasionally you'd get this majesty of light, you know, in the distance, and I just wanted to take advantage of that when it came around. This is the result of that. And you can see a bit of ink in here. I wanted to just get more playful than I normally do with some other mediums, some chalk to kind of solidify shapes and kind of communicate this backlit environment. So yeah. This painting was particularly important to me in my artistic development because it clarified a lot of the style and handling that I'm looking for. The subject being the city and the people being an accompaniment to the city. And so it kind of combines these various elements that I love about art, which is architecture and a loose impressionistic handling of watercolor with a strong drawing of figurative work as well. This piece kind of embodies a lot of what I love about watercolor. My Ukrainian friends have pointed out that these bags of people walking through the city with their groceries is very characteristic of Lviv in this way. This soldier here is very characteristic. I would often see him in the city square. And then this figure over here sitting is playing a bandura, I believe it's called. I got the pronunciation wrong, and you know, I was mistaking it for bandera, which is a soldier. Eyes Blue in Fields of Gold features a gold leaf component, which is the first time that I've ever used gold leaf in my pictures before. I am a master gilder. I've been a custom frame maker for 5 years, so I'm very familiar with this material and its application. Although this surface was new for me, this kind of composition was new for me, so it was very experimental. I felt like this was a necessary story for me. I just wanted to indicate, again, this is very impressionistic, but I just wanted to indicate the wheat and the components and feature these sunflowers kind of having a direction this way around her. This was made with drawings initially done on tracing paper, which I transferred onto this illustration board. You can see her hair is gold as well to kind of rhyme and connect with the wheat and the sunflowers and kind of show that she is a part of this land. You know, she's not just here, but she is growing with it. It's called Bernardine Cathedral and Monastery, and we saw a previous sketch that I did of the scene. This one is different in the sense that I have created a square composition instead of a longer one. I've excluded the bus stop that was on the right, and I've excluded King Danilo's horse and King Danilo. I've centralized the focus onto this building, which is so beautiful in its Mannerist style, lovely sculptural components in here. I don't want to get these wrong, but in here you've got the Virgin Mary, you've got Christ, again the people shoveling the walkway, riding their bike. I wanted to create a kind of rhythm of, again, this two-tone picture with a major dark and then a light and then some detail in between, whereas most pictures feature a three-tone composition with a middle value, a dark and a light. This creates a more graphic design and I think a more atmospheric, moody effect. This is very characteristic of most watercolor styles. Many watercolorists will feature this kind of rainy day. I don't do it very much, but for this particular scene, I felt like it was very necessary. I continued to have so much fun after laying in this big shape and having these organic stippling effects from the brush. This white here is just the paper, but of course up here you might see a little bit of opaque for some detail, but it's handled very loosely. I'm throwing the paint around, letting it drip, trying to get that organic nature while holding to strong drawing and a story, hold to these kind of rhythm. I mean, I could have flattened this out and made this straight, but I feel like its shape requires a kind of musical conduction this way, kind of minor conduction in here, you know, and the way these travel up. So I had a lot of fun with this one. I've wanted my work since to have more of this feel to it, which I love. And then you notice I did take my airbrush and just squirt just a little bit of opaque around these car lights just to give a little bit of a glow. This one I handled in a little bit more of a two-tone composition. I basically have two major values, the light and then the cutout of the scene, basically, and then the shapes of the people creating a buzz kind of on the lower part of the picture. I wanted to keep this fairly flat so that this stole more of the attention down here. I'm always conscious of the weight that a picture has. Is it heavier on the top? Is it heavier on the bottom? And I wanted this one to kind of hold down here a little bit more. I just love the combination of shapes and how these people were cutting out the negative shape of the ground underneath. The stroller back here, and these people, because the light was coming from the back, the walkway was just lit and kind of blown out like a highlight. This is an area that I would frequent.
Is that Italian or is that Ukrainian?
That's Ukrainian. That means museum.
That's museums plural in Italian, right, Chelsea?
Oh, really? Okay. This painting, Musée, depicts this little museum that I never got to explore the contents of while I was there. So I just had the opportunity to appreciate its exterior. Originally, this building was a postal service. A small little detail is the Ukrainian flag in the back down here. I just loved the rhythm and the design of this scene that travels up here and has a motion to it this way. Again, following the theme of the previous painting of the city as subject and the people as complement. I really love this approaching figurative work with minimalism and seeing how I can tell the stories of these people with as few marks as possible while still communicating their gesture and their weight and maybe their fashion sense. I just really love that. Again, I love to let it drip and do, you know, the organic things that watercolor wants to do naturally, but still hold to a strong drawing somewhere in there in some aspects. So I wanted to pay enough respect to the architecture and again place it in Lviv and make it unmistakably of that region. I've been glad to have people come and see my work with an unprompted recognize it as Lviv. I was surprised, but that is what I was going for. I do remember when I first thought of doing these watercolors for this show, I wanted it to be recognizable by people from Ukraine. This was the first painting that I completed of Lviv. I did plenty of sketches before, but this was the first big one. And I loved it for the dynamic shapes that came across and hit these buildings so hard and just enveloped the rest of the picture in shadow. I loved the kind of lead-in of these figures going down the hill to this bus stop over here, and I really liked how the light just barely caught the edge of this tram, this trolley just before it passed through. I'm always looking for those kinds of stories of light that are fleeting, where there's not much of it left and you want to capture it before it's gone. These works I did in the spirit of preservation and for the purpose of transporting me back to that place where I stood and I took this image with my camera and I foresaw a watercolor in that. And so it was a very special time for me to be there as a 24-year-old, and I don't want to forget that opportunity and that moment that I got to be in Ukraine, an amazing place. And so when I look at these paintings, that's what I want it to do for me. I want it to take me back. It is part of the development of the previous one. I was going for a different handling. I was going for a slightly different lighting effect, including a little bit more pencil and keeping these shapes more abstract and more less recognizable. I know that might seem kind of strange, but in order for me to punch the shape and get the graphic design that I'm looking for, sometimes I have to sacrifice the details of their clothing and the form to get the organic spontaneity that I feel like some pictures need. This is the last piece in this exhibition that I've painted this picture several times, and I wonder why I chose this version specifically over the other ones that I did. I loved the atmospheric, moody, kind of rainy day scene. I think it lends itself very well to watercolor, and I wanted to let it drip, and I wanted to get crazy with the darks and flattening out this shape. I do that a lot of watercolorists I feel would do well to implement is not being afraid of opacity. Yes, it is a gouache at this point, but I think that's just fine. I think that if you allow yourself to use opaque watercolor, even just a little bit, it can really strengthen your design for its application of negative shape on top of the positive, which cuts out these shapes behind and brings them forward. So it creates a kind of dynamic play between the two. I feel like that's been important in some respects for various pieces. I just wanted to indicate this. I didn't want to go so crazy into the detail because then I would be left feeling like I just painted a picture without much purpose for me, you know? I'm always looking for what can I extract out of this? What can I get that will teach me something, as opposed to just practicing how to illustrate something the way that I saw it, you know? So I'm trying to let watercolor teach me something that I did not expect. These windows were painted by my grandfather and my uncle in the early 90s. And one of the reasons I wanted to exhibit here at the library is to honor my grandfather, who taught me how to paint and taught me everything that I know about picture making and shape and color. I just wanted to at least once hang next to him, just, you know, to honor him.